So now that we've done that, I want to actually show you guys how to do something a little bit more advanced with this same kind of scene right here. So what I've gone ahead and done is set up a file that uses mental ray to render out an ambient occlusion map. So again, I've just got, there's my plane. I've got a light in the scene actually right here, so I'm just going to switch this over to use the default lighting so we can see what's going on. So you can see what our scene looks like. And I've made a light in there and turned it off so that we don't have the default lights in the viewport interfering with the ambient occlusion that we're about to create. So the first thing I need to do to create the ambient occlusion is set up a basic shader and use mental ray. So let's go make sure that we've got mental ray chosen as our renderer. So let's come down here to assign renderer, and we've already got mental ray assigned. I can just pick on that. If I didn't, I could just choose mental ray out of the list. So we've got mental ray assigned. Come into my shader, and you'll notice that in this material I only have one texture in the diffuse color of the texture. And what I've actually done is actually gone in and picked ambient reflective occlusion right here from the list. This is actually a mental ray shader. And I'm applying this to the diffuse color of the object. You're probably asking that. You're probably thinking that's a little bit weird. But basically what this little shader here is going to do is actually calculate the ambient occlusion in the diffuse color channel of these objects, and then I'm going to render a diffuse color map with my projection to get an ambient occlusion map. And it's going to render it very, very fast. Instead of, the other alternative to doing it this way is actually to make a sky dome, put a bunch of lights in your scene, or make a skylight in your scene, and then hit off, you hit your render button, and it takes 3 hours to make your ambient occlusion map. And doing it this way, it'll render actually very, very, very quickly. So now that I've set that shader up and applied it to the stones and mortar, I'm going to go ahead and select my plane that I'm using. I've got those in my projection. Come up here to rendering, render to texture. I've got this all set up. I've got my projection. I'm going to come down here, and I've got a lot of stuff set up in here, but what I've done is gone ahead and just turned off enable. So it's only going to render out the diffuse color map for now. That's the only map that I've got enabled. So that's another little handy tip for you guys is if you just want to render out one pass of all the stuff that you're working on, you can just go ahead and select the other passes that you've added and just uncheck enable, and it'll only render the one that is enabled. So we've got our diffuse map. You also notice down here in the selected element unique settings of the diffuse map, and if I change this, you'll see that I get different settings down there for each of these different types of maps. In the diffuse channel, I've gone ahead and turned off lighting and turned on shadows. And what that's going to do is basically allow the ambient occlusion map to actually function in the scene. So now that I've got all that set up, I'm just going to check one last thing in the object properties of this plane. And I'm just going to make sure I turn off visible to reflection refraction. And the reason I'm doing that is because if this is visible to the reflective ambient occlusion base shader, when it renders, it'll occlude the actual render. So instead of getting an ambient occlusion from the scene, we've got this plane that's sitting over our rocks and our mortar. It'll actually it'll occlude that, and all you'll get is a really dark render of that. So now we've checked all those things. We should check one last thing to see where we're rendering to. So we're just rendering to the C drive. I'm going to just change my path real quick here. Come in there. And I'm going to give this output a name. Just name that ambient occlusion and hit render. So now mental ray is fired up, and it's going to start calculating this. you can see that the progress is moving across fairly quickly. If I were to like drop a skylight into the scene and attempt to render an ambient occlusion map off of this very simple scene, it might take an hour. Whereas with mental ray, sending it up by just adding the ambient occlusion into the shader and rendering it this way, it renders very, very quickly. So this is one way that you can kind of take the ambient occlusion map. So you'll bake out your diffuse color channel, and then you can bake out the ambient occlusion map in addition to that. Take those into Photoshop and just layer them together to get a nice shaded feel on that texture. So once this completes, we'll hop over into Photoshop and show you that.